Greetings, citizens. Hey you beautiful creepy little human being you. Welcome to my channel and welcome to today's Morbid makeup video. I'm so happy you found me. I'm so happy that somehow in all of this craziness today you and I were able to find each other on this crazy planet that we call home. My name is Brittany or BRATTERSTEIN, whichever you prefer, and today we're going to be discussing a woman named Nancy Brophy. Now Nancy, she was a self-published writer, and in addition to writing her romance and her crime novels, she wrote this cute little blog post titled, How to Murder Your Husband. Okay, and now Nancy is sitting in jail, awaiting trial after being charged with, guess, what do you think? Murdering her husband. But before we get started, if you have not yet had the pleasure, please make sure to join the Brat Pack by subscribing and ringing the bell because I put out a new Morbid makeup video every single week and I would love to hang out with you. Yes, you specifically, you, so subscribe. Join us. Become one of us. One of us. One of us. One of us. Okay, now that we're done with that self-promotion, we can get into the video. So this is one of those cases that's just so sensational. Just like the story alone, the media like ate it up, and the way that they portrayed it was like, How to Murder Your Husband, author arrested for murdering husband. And it's just like, come on, man. And I'm surprised to see that this case in general is not more represented on YouTube, because just the story alone is just so, like, I'm just surprised people aren't talking about it. I've only seen a couple of videos, which blew my mind. In researching this case, I saw a ton of news articles, obviously, and all of them are talking about, you know, how life is imitating art and art is imitating life and truth is stranger than fiction. And I get it because I became so engrossed in this case. And I mean, technically, you know, she hasn't been convicted. She's only been charged. So Nancy Brophy is innocent until proven guilty. But my gosh, bro, if she is innocent, she is the most unlucky person in the world, because the evidence against her, along with the writing, like, there is so much. But you know what? Let's get into that, huh? So come, gather around and let me tell you the story of Nancy Brophy, the author of the blog post How to Murder Your Husband, who is now awaiting trial for murdering her husband. On Saturday morning, June 2nd, 2018, 63-year-old Dan Brophy arrived at the Oregon Culinary Institute in Portland, located at 1701 Southwest Jefferson Street, where Dan worked as an instructor. He was the first to arrive at the Culinary Institute that day. He's the one who opened up the school, and he disarmed the alarm at 7:20 a.m. About 10 minutes later, the second teacher arrived and did not see Dan anywhere. I don't believe this teacher was looking for Dan, but it was noted that this teacher did not see Dan. In that 10-minute window between Dan arriving at the school and disarming the alarm and the second teacher arriving for their shift that day, Dan was murdered. He had been in the kitchen just getting ready for, you know, work that day, getting the kitchen ready, filling up buckets with like ice and water, when he was shot twice. One bullet had entered Dan's back, severing his spine, leaving him paralyzed, and the second shot came at point-blank range in his chest, entering his heart. 30 minutes later, at about 8 o'clock, his students started showing up and came into the class, and that's where they found him bleeding on the ground, and of course they called 911, trying to save his life, and paramedics came, but by the time they got there, he was already dead. Along with police and medical professionals, Dan's wife, 68-year-old Nancy Brophy, showed up at the scene. Apparently nobody at the school had called her, which I thought was kind of odd. I saw it written that way, and I thought that, I don't understand why they wouldn't have. But one of her neighbors let her know what had happened. Maybe they were driving by and saw it. I'm not exactly sure. I couldn't get clarification on that point, but she rushed over to try to, you know, see if he was okay, see what she could do. But by the time she got there, he had already died. You know, rushed over like a very concerned little wife. So right off the bat, this case like stumped police because the motive was completely unclear. The first thing they thought is, okay, somebody came to the school with the intention to rob the school, and he just happened to be there and was a victim of a random act of violence, but he had not been robbed. His wallet was still on his body. There was no sign of forced entry. There was no sign of a struggle. It looked as if somebody had shown up there with the sole purpose to murder this man for no apparent reason, and it all happened so quickly in that little 10-minute window. So police started looking into the victim. Who was Dan Brophy and who would want this man dead? Police did not find this to be a particularly easy task, however, because there was no one who seemed to dislike this man. Dan Brophy was just a nice dude with no apparent enemies. He had been working at the school for over 10 years and was the resident encyclopedia of knowledge, and his coworkers and his students all loved him. He was just known as being like a quirky dude who wore costumes to school and who would like help his students remember the rules with unconventional methods. For example, if you forgot your hat, you would have to wear a sombrero all day during class, or if you forgot your gloves, you would have to wear oven mitts throughout the class. He was a marine biologist. He was a mushroom expert. He was the teacher who would take his students out into the wild to forage for mushrooms that were safe to eat that they could use in their cooking during class. He was just known as being like a super kind and generous man. He would often do whatever he could to help the homeless population, which in Portland, Oregon, the homeless population is insane. I've been there several times and it's a real problem out there. And I guess every Thanksgiving, him and his students would bake a bunch of like fresh pies and he would go and personally deliver them to homeless shelters and homeless people. He was the type of guy who loved animals and loved gardening, and on his property he had dogs and chickens and turkeys, and he had a vegetable garden so that he could cook with fresh vegetables every day, and he loved his wife, and outwardly she loved him too, or she seemed to. Now, speaking of his wife, who was Nancy Brophy? At the time of Dan's murder, Nancy Brophy was 68 years old, and her and Dan had been married for 27 years, almost 30 years. Nancy was a self-published writer, and she wrote like romance and crime books, kind of like, okay, you know, if you've seen My Girl, which maybe I'm aging myself, but My Girl, the books that Shelley had in her camper that she's like, you can't read, the ones that are filled with like love and like toxic relationships and hot men and hot women who go on adventures together, you know, all the drama. She wrote those kinds of books. The books though, like, didn't do very well, and since she was self-published, she was the one funding like all the printing and whatever goes into like self-publishing books. She was putting out the money for it, and since they weren't selling very well, she had to have an actual job that brought in income, and Nancy sold insurance, and she specialized in life insurance and workers' comp. The day after her husband was murdered, Nancy informed all of her friends and family, all of Dan's loved ones, through a Facebook post, and I'm now going to read you that Facebook post. For my Facebook friends and family, I have sad news to relate. My husband and best friend, Chef Dan Brophy, was killed yesterday morning. For those of you who are close to me and feel this deserved a phone call, you are right. But I am struggling to make sense of everything right now. She also took this opportunity to let everybody know about a candlelight vigil that the school that Dan worked at was going to be holding very shortly thereafter, to let people know in case they wanted to come. At the candlelight vigil for their fallen friend, hundreds of people showed up, and Nancy was there, obviously, and people who were there said she seemed really heartbroken and distraught, at least then, and she gave a lovely, moving speech about her late husband, which I'm, again, going to read to you right now. Daniel was one of the few people I've ever known who did exactly what he wanted in life and loved doing it. He was a person who did what he loved. He loved teaching, he loved mushrooms, and he loved his family. Though Nancy showed emotion while in front of an audience, like at the candlelight vigil, and she gave her, you know, little heart-wrenching speech, apparently in like one-on-one interactions, her attitude towards the situation was somewhat different. Apparently she seemed unconcerned, she didn't seem upset. If anything, she felt light, and she seemed like she had an air of relief about her. And later, when she told her neighbor that she was considered to be a suspect for her husband's murder, she said it in a way that just seemed very casual and like it didn't matter and it didn't bother her, which just struck him as odd. To illuminate this rather bizarre, detached, unbothered energy that she had after her husband and best friend were murdered, within a week of his murder, Nancy had reached out to the detectives who were, you know, investigating her husband's case, and she asked them for a letter, something in writing that said that she was eliminated as a suspect. Now, why would she want this? What reason could she have to request this document? Well, it's because she needed to send it to the life insurance company so that she could get the money for Dan dying. A week, right? And Police thought that was weird, and I think it's a little bit weird because, I mean, I don't really know how, like, funerals work, because I know funerals are expensive, and I should know how they work with payment plans. My mom's husband is a mortician, I believe, funeral director. He works with the dead, and maybe she needed the money to pay for his funeral, but the police did think it was weird because it had been less than a week since he had been killed. So they started to look into her, and they started looking into her alibi, and they also, since the school did not have cameras for recording, you know, the outside common area perimeters, they asked businesses around the area for any footage that they have that may have caught anything in or around the school at the time of the murder. So when Nancy had been questioned by police about her alibi at the time that her husband was murdered, she told them that she had just been at home chilling, not killing, you know, doing her thing at home, but the lie detector determined that was a lie. Because remember a second ago I told you that they asked like the businesses around for their surveillance footage. So they discovered on CCTV that there was a van driving back and forth near the crime scene right around the time of the shooting that was identical to the minivan that Nancy Brophy drove. So the minivan was first seen in the area at about 6:30 a.m., which was before Dan Brophy was even in the area, which is a little bit odd. Like she was driving around, if she did it, like staking out the place, seeing who was there, seeing what was around, getting the lay of the land, right? It was then seen again for the second time at around a little after 7, but before 7:21 when Dan entered and disarmed the alarm at the school. But then her van was seen again at 7:28. So that means that or what was thought to have been her van was seen again at 7:28. So that means that if she did this, she would have had to have gotten there. She was already in the area. She had to get out. She had to go in. She had to kill him. And then she had to leave all in less than 10 minutes, which seems crazy, but it actually fits with the timeline. If you remember before, I said that he turned the alarm off at 7:21 and then the next teacher arrived 10 minutes later. So it seems to fit pretty well with that timeline, doesn't it? So there wasn't much evidence at the crime scene, but the little bit of evidence they did have, police followed up on every single lead and investigated really thoroughly into each piece that they did have. And of these few pieces that they had were 2 shell casings that were used in the murder, the bullets that entered Dan's body. These bullets were determined to have come from a Glock handgun. And in investigating further into the case, it seems like these casings might have been left intentionally, which is a little genius and also super stupid. And we're going to get into that right now. So Nancy and Dan did own a gun. They owned a Glock. And Nancy, not a dum-dum, realized that, you know, police are gonna know this, right? So she offered up the information like, hey, yeah, we have a gun. We bought it at a gun show a while back because there had been a school shooting and it rattled us. So we bought a Glock, but I have not ever used it. I've never bought bullets for it. It's just chilling in case it's necessary. So police like check their gun and they look into it and it appears like she's telling the truth. It doesn't look like it's ever been shot. But police are already like a little suspicious of her. They find her energy to be a little bit sketchy with her chill, like non-bothered attitude, and then asking for something in writing that helped her get her insurance for her husband's death and like saying she wasn't a suspect. So they were looking into her and they didn't immediately rule her out as a suspect, even though the gun wasn't a match, because she seemed off. And I think that Nancy had banked on them immediately ruling her out and not looking further into this gun thing, but she was mistaken. She wasn't as smart as she thought she was. So police keep looking into Nancy and they find that she is a little sketch, dude. So leading up to the murder of her husband, Nancy had been making some very interesting Google searches like how to make a ghost gun, which I looked into what a ghost gun is because I don't know anything about guns. And apparently, correct me if I'm wrong, if you're a gun person, it appears to be a gun that is harder to be traced by police because it is made from pieces of various guns, right? And she had actually gone on eBay and had bought additional pieces for that Glock gun, that she and her husband had purchased previously. So it is theorized by police that what happened in this case is Nancy bought these pieces. to modify the Glock that she and her husband owned. So she took it, she switched some parts in it, right? She then took this modified gun, she went, bang, bang, killed her husband. She then went back to her house, took the modified gun apart, and reinstalled it to its original luster, right? So now the bullets that were left at the crime scene are gonna have different like striations and marks on it that will not match her gun when they come to check it, because she knows they're gonna come and check it. So she's like, okay, I'm gonna leave these bullets here so that they have something to test against my gun, because if I don't leave the casings, they're gonna just see it was a Glock and not be able to rule me out. But if they don't match, they can't connect me to it. So that's why I say that this was sort of genius, because I don't think I've ever even heard of that happening before. But it's also sort of dumb because she bought all the stuff on eBay, which was traceable. She was doing her little Google searches like how to make a ghost gun and how to murder your husband. The slide and barrel, which are the pieces that are believed to have been switched in the gun that she purchased off eBay, have never been recovered. She got rid of them. But that's suspicious. Like, why would you buy parts and now they're just gone, so we can't even test them? And right before the murder, she deleted her eBay account. Because apparently that solves everything. So while police are putting together all of these pieces, Nancy is looking to leave, right? She's packing up, she's looking to sell the house. She's like, it's just too hard to be here with all the memories of Dan. And that does seem like a legit thing for a person to do in her situation, if she wasn't the killer, but it also seems like a pretty suspicious thing to do if she was. It only took police about 3 months to put all the pieces of the puzzle together and to form a whole picture. And when they put it all together, it appeared that Nancy Brophy, the author of the very interesting blog post, How to Murder Your Husband, which we're going to get into shortly, had allegedly, in fact, murdered her husband. Nancy Brophy was arrested in late 2018 and charged with murder and unlawful use of a weapon. The community and her friends were shocked. Friends have said they're just sick about her being arrested and hope that police are wrong and that they're just targeting the easiest target, because it's always the husband or the wife. So they're hoping that they're just wrong, but doesn't seem like it. Now, why would Nancy Brophy want to murder her husband? What would be the motive for this woman to kill her husband and best friend of nearly 30 years? Well, there are a few acceptable reasons to murder your husband, according to author Nancy Brophy. In a blog post dated November 4th, which is my birthday, of 2011, Nancy writes that as a suspense, romance, and crime author, she spends a lot of time looking into murders, which, girl, same. She also stated that, she looks into a lot of police procedures because if murder is supposed to set her free, she certainly doesn't want to spend any time in jail. She then goes on to list all of the acceptable motives for murdering your husband. Number 1, financial. Nancy's favorite. She goes on to talk about how expensive divorce is and asks, like, would you really want to split up your assets? No, of course not. She talks about if you were one who had married for money, aren't you entitled to all of it? And then she suggests perhaps pushing your husband off a cruise ship. Which again, cruise ships. No. Number 2, the lying, cheating bastard, or a deception of any type. She doesn't recommend killing for this reason because a crime of passion is very likely to get you caught. If you were, for example, to bash his head in, there would likely be a trail that would lead the police straight back to you. Number 3, fell in love with someone else. She also puts a little notation here that this too could be a financially motivated crime, which got my wheels turning a little bit. It's that pinball machine thing that I mentioned at some point in my life. And the last 2 are that your husband's an abuser or that killing is your profession. And in the section where she talks about it being your profession, she says, and I quote, "Quick hit and you fade from the scene. Get your payment up front from someone else, because life insurance probably won't send you a check." She then goes on to list the different options to consider, of which are the methods of murder: guns, knives, a garrote, heavy random piece of equipment, poison, hiring a hitman, or hiring a lover. Towards the end, she says, and I quote, "The thing I know about murder is that every one of us has it in him/her if pushed far enough." Now, which one of these reasons turned out to be Nancy's suspected reason? Can you guess? I left little breadcrumbs throughout this video, so maybe you have an idea. I'll give you a second. Go ahead and guess. Leave it down below. Money! It's always money, right? Like, the almighty dollar over everything. Do you remember what I told you that Nancy does or did for a living besides writing? Insurance. So little Miss Nancy Brophy here had been taking out life insurance policies on her husband Dan, and she had taken out several. In addition to these several life insurance policies, which there's not even proof that Dan knew that these were taken out against him, she was also set to get even more money because he was killed at work. In addition to that, she also would be the sole beneficiary to their assets, which namely would be their house. So with all of this, being the sole beneficiary for all of this stuff, she was set up to get over $1 million if Dan died. Now this would come in handy for Nancy because the couple, this might have been the wrong choice. Apparently the couple was experiencing money problems, right? For the last year at least, the two had been living on a month-to-month budget, which I wasn't aware that was called money troubles. I thought that was just like how we all live our lives. Anyway, additionally, Nancy was over the life that she had. She wanted to sell their home and to travel and to experience new things. It sounds like she was just super bored, dude, and she had expressed to friends that she did not believe that she could convince Dan to do this with her. Because Dan was happy. Dan liked his simple life. Dan liked his job. Dan liked his family. Dan liked his house with his garden and his animals. And just, he was satisfied with what he had. And so she probably just felt stuck because she was kind of over it, even though it sounds like actual paradise. Nancy. That same year that the couple were having money troubles in 2017, Dan, who had been the sole name on the house, the deed of the house, the person who owned the house, and the house was estimated at being valued at around $300,000, maybe a little bit more. Well, he decided randomly, and we're not exactly sure what happened that prompted this, but he changed it from being just in his name to being in his and Nancy's name. I didn't see it reported as to why he did it or even if it was proved that he did it himself, but I believe he would have had to have done this one himself. I don't know if she could have like forged documents for something like that. I'm not sure. I don't know what criminals do. I'm just learning along with you. Let's keep going. So you add that to all those insurance policies, and Dan's looking like he's worth more to her, allegedly, dead than alive. And the insurance policies are really interesting because, okay, she took out several, right? And she took these out when the couple was like having their financial struggles. And even though she was missing her mortgage payments on her house, which were around $6,000, she made sure to pay all the premiums on those life insurance policies. And those totaled $16,000. So she's having struggles, not paying for her house, but she's paying for these. So it just goes to show where her mind was and what was a priority to her. And it seems like this was like a long con. Like she had been planning this a while. If she did it. If she did it. And I keep saying if because I don't know if I can be sued. I don't really understand. So allegedly, if we don't know, she's still innocent right now. So the picture is just becoming a little bit clearer in regards to Miss Nancy because she allegedly seemed to think she was committing the perfect crime. And like some of it was pretty smart, but some of it is just so dumb that I'm like, girl, I thought you researched this stuff. So the trial against Nancy Brophy was set to start in September of 2020, but I have seen literally no update on that. I've looked and there's like no new news articles on her case in months. So I have to assume, I can only assume, that due to COVID, things have been delayed. But something notable, last year, 2020, Nancy and her defense attorney did try to get her released from prison. They stated that because she was 70 or about to be 70 now, and because she had diabetes, she was at a much higher risk of contracting COVID. So they wanted to get her bail reduced to like a reasonable amount so that she could pay to get out, and then she would stay in like a little cottage with an ankle monitor and watch her and keep her safe from catching. But in April of 2020, the judge denied this because, okay, so the prosecution scheduled a motion to show the judge just how strong their case was and to contest Nancy being let out on bail because of the very, very high likelihood that she was guilty. The prosecution said, and I quote, Nancy Brophy once wrote that finances could be motivation for one murdering a spouse. The bottom line is Dan Brophy was worth $1.5 million to Nancy Brophy if he was dead. And he was worth a lifetime of financial hardship if he was alive. After examining this evidence, the judge agreed. And it's because of this motion that we, the public, actually have all this information and all the details on what happened in this crime, because prior to this motion and the prosecution actually putting all their information out there, they were keeping it like really close to the chest for some reason. But now we know, and that's why I can tell you now. In addition to the judge denying the reduced bail for Nancy, the judge also ordered Nancy to have no contact with Dan's family because, as the judge said, they were victims too. And speaking of his family, Dan's son from a prior relationship is actually suing Nancy for wrongful death, and he's trying to challenge Nancy's rights to his father's home. Apparently, while in prison, Nancy has gotten herself into a little trouble because she has been conducting illegal activities. She's been doing illegal shit from inside of prison, and I'm really curious about this because apparently whatever illegal stuff she's doing, which has been unspecified at this point, we'll probably know more at trial, but whatever it is, it involves people who have been visiting her in prison. And this gets my wheels turning because there is a theory that I heard, it's just a theory, it's not fact-based at all, but there's a theory that she didn't act alone, Nancy, and that maybe somebody helped her, and that's why the 7-minute window was so short, because she was just kind of driving around being the lookout and somebody else had gone in and actually committed the murder. But this, of course, is just theory. There's literally no fact to back this up. This is just something that people have said, and it's something that like gets my wheels turning when I hear certain things like that people are visiting her and she's doing illegal things. What if it's the other person who helped? Or when she said in her blog post that like a new lover could also be a financial motivation. It just gets my wheels turning and interests me. Anyways, these are just, you know, the thoughts that go through my head. As I said, pinball machine in there, man. Sometimes I get a thought and just is like bam, 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 and I go crazy with it. But it's all speculation. There's nothing, don't take it as serious or anything. It's just my thoughts. What are your thoughts on that? Nancy's defense attorney is doing their best. They've challenged what the prosecution is saying that they don't really have a case, that there's not even any proof that she ever bought any bullets, and that there's no evidence that shows there was ever even any issues with the couple leading up to his murder. Apparently, there are text messages that show that Nancy and Dan were still like intimate physically leading up to his death. And they say that there is no real case, that they simply have a van that matches the description of Nancy's van, and that's it. So only time will really tell what's going to happen here. I mean, I think that the evidence is pretty damning. I think that the prosecution does have a lot, even if you take out the incredibly incriminating writings that she's done. If all they had against her was her writings, I might be able to say, like, sure, you know, people write, they write weird things, they're interested in weird things. I'm sure if you looked at my computer history and my husband turned up dead, it's gonna look pretty weird too. But, you know, that's not the only thing they have against her. And when you add it all together, it seems a little weird, man. Oh, and the How to Murder Your Husband blog post is not the only weird thing that Nancy Brophy wrote. Nancy Brophy has a website. It's one of those like meet the author type things where she talks about herself and her background and like the books that she's written, etc., etc. And I've perused this. I've actually read it in its entirety. And the very first line she wrote about herself immediately unsettled me. Writers are liars. I don't remember who said this, but it's not true. In writing fiction, you dig deep and unearth portions of your life that you've long forgotten or purposely buried deep. That's particularly unnerving to me when you think of some of the things that she's written that are apparently just unearthed portions of herself, like How to Murder Your Husband. She also wrote it another time. I find it easier to wish people dead than to actually kill them. And in another particularly unsettling line from a passage written by Nancy Brophy, she says, "Murder, mayhem, and gore seem to come naturally to me. Which means my husband has learned to sleep with one eye open." The husband who has now been murdered. So those are like some weird things to write, right? And it's actually really sad when you read this writing, because there's a clear transition from this to how she started, because in her earlier writings, she had like nothing but great things to say about her husband. She talks about just loving him, and she talks about the moment that she decided she wanted to marry him, and when I read it, it seems like such a sweet moment. She talks about how she was like hanging out in a giant bathtub, and she called to him and was like, hey, are you gonna come, you know, take a bath with me? And he's like, just a second, babe, I'm making hors d'oeuvres. And I'm like, a bath? Food? You have a house with dogs and turkeys and chickens and a garden and a man who wants to cook for you? And you live in the Pacific Northwest? Like, it all just sounds so awesome. It sounds like she's literally living the dream. And for whatever reason, she just seems to have fell out of love with both her husband and her life. And that, my friends, is the story of Nancy Brophy, the woman who authored the blog post, How to Murder Your Husband, who is now in jail waiting trial for murdering her husband. What do you think? I think she definitely doesn't look very good. It seems like pretty clear that she did it, right? Like, I can't imagine another scenario, but it is, of course, pretty circumstantial. But you can, however, convict somebody on circumstantial evidence. You just gotta like use your brain. Take the pieces of the puzzle and put them together. And if no other thing would reasonably fit in this puzzle, you have the full picture. The motive seems clear. She bought the extra parts to the gun to make it so that it couldn't be traceable, and those have yet to be recovered. A vehicle matching her description was at the crime scene several times. She, it happened so quickly. The murder itself happened so quickly that it had to have been somebody who was familiar with his routine and knew just how big of a window of opportunity they had to actually commit the murder. She wanted to move and have new adventures, allegedly, and was likely just really bored. Maybe she didn't want the happy little life like she had. Maybe she had been writing about this sensational, drama-filled life for so long that she actually wanted that, so since this didn't live up to that, it was just like not worth having for her anymore. Maybe she just really wanted the drama and couldn't be content with what she had, and could she leave and just like get a divorce? Sure, but then she'd be in financial trouble, and as she said before, do you really want to split up your assets? It's just sad. I've never been able to understand how somebody could go from loving someone enough to marry them. Like, that's a big thing, to marry a person, to call them your best friend, and then to allegedly murder them. They'll never exist again. They're gone forever. Like, that's so sad to me. And then I think about the actual crime, and I wonder if it was sad for him too, because the first shot was in his back, yes, but the second shot was point blank range in the chest. Did he know it was her? Did he look at her? Did she look at him? Did she say anything to him? Or did she just like look at him and kill him and that was it? That's just like so freaking sad. I can't imagine what that must have been like. And he just sounded like a cool dude. He sounded like a cool, nice dude, and he was probably like a really cool, interesting husband to have. And now he's just gone forever, and he doesn't get to shine his light on all the people who were in his life, and he also doesn't get to finish living his. And I know, she's innocent until proven guilty. But I'll say it again. If she did not do this, she is the most unlucky person I've ever heard of. She's even more unlucky than some people think Scott Peterson is. I'm not saying that I think Scott Peterson is very unlucky. I'm just saying that some people do. And of course, it's possible that she's innocent. It's possible that the writings were just writings. They were nothing but that. Just something fun, a way to express herself, and a total work of fiction. But in the words of Nancy Brophy herself, in writing fiction, you dig and unearth portions of your life that you purposely buried deep. So, but anyways, guys, that completes this video. I hope that it was interesting and informative and gave you everything you could want when looking into this case. I'm really happy that you were here and you wanted to sit here and remember Dan Brophy's life with me. I think that that's important. And of course, I hope you enjoyed it. I want you to always enjoy the information that I'm putting out into the world. Please let me know of any cases you would like to see me cover in the future. I have a very long list of upcoming cases in my phone, but every single time you leave a suggestion, I always add it to the list and I put your little name next to it so I can give you a shout out, because I know you're filled with good taste and good ideas, otherwise you would not be here. And of course, if you have not already, make sure to join the Brat Pack by subscribing and ringing the bell, because I put out a new Morbid makeup video every single week and I would love to hang out with you. And if you want all notifications, make sure to ring the bell, because I'll put like polls and I'll be like, hey, I'm gonna go on live. And if you miss it, I'm so sorry, but if you ring the bell, you won't miss it. You know, it'll alert you. And if you want to follow me on any of my other social medias, I have Instagram and Twitter, and they are both BRATTERSTEIN, just like my namesake here, and I am on both of them every single day. And with all of that said, thank you for being here when you could literally be anywhere else in the world. That's tight, you're tight, and I hope to see you in my next video.